As I said in the context part of this interview, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Warsaw following a visit to Kyiv, where he discussed ongoing military support for Ukraine amid its struggle against Russian aggression. The trip coincides with broader diplomatic activity across Europe and comes ahead of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the U.S. later this month. Key topics included military aid, defense cooperation, and regional security. And now joining us here in TVP World to break down these developments is Małgorzata Bonikowska, President of Center for International Relations, also a lecturer at the Warsaw University. Hello, good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
So, is there anything that stands out in this visit of Antony Blinken to Warsaw, to Poland?
Well, first of all, it shows that Poland is really one of the key countries in the new security architecture in Europe. Nothing really happens in this domain without Polish participation. And it's also it's good sign that the partners strictly coordinate all the decisions as far as this regards. So the Americans, the Brits, and the Poles together talk to the Ukrainians in this very crucial phase of war. So I guess that's a very strong signal. And second is, of course, some important decision to be taken, which I believe were in details discussed during this visit.
I think that Secretary Blinken even said here in Warsaw that the relations between Poland and the United States have never been better before.
Well, definitely they are very good. It has always been a very close, relation between these two countries. But now the intensity of the visits and also the scale of the problems is much larger, things are much higher, at stake. So it's a very specific moment. And all these recent 2.5 years with the war in Ukraine happening made Poland the key ally of the U.S. at the eastern flank and made also Poland a hub for all the operations concerning Ukraine, not only in the military domain. The same goes for transportation, for export from Ukraine. The same goes for humanitarian aid and even financial aid to the Ukrainians to just keep going their country.
And do you think that this diplomatic activity here in Central Europe by the Americans somehow signifies and lays the foundations for potential future peace talks? Because I believe both Russia and Ukraine have signaled that they would want to negotiate, that they are ready to negotiate. I think they still disagree strongly on how it all should be done. But do you think that now the main focus of the Western world and of the United States, the United Kingdom, is to bring this war to an end?
Well, definitely 2.5 years is a long time, and Ukrainians themselves would love this war to be ended, but not by all means. So the key question is when this moment will come that Russians will be able to think that they will not win this war. Because until the moment Russia is certain that they can win, they will not change their negotiation position, which is basically the world to accept what they've taken out of Ukraine, which is not acceptable position to the Ukrainians, of course, and to the West as well. So I believe we are trying to build a momentum with the help of Ukraine, with also the weapons they got and with the right to operate now on the Russian soil as well, to make this happen, to be closer to this momentum. Otherwise, the negotiations don't make sense. And of course, for the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government, it will be very difficult to move on, to accept any negotiations with Russia at that stage.
You've mentioned the long-range weapons, and this is something that I really want to ask you about, because the U.S. is hesitant, it looks like, to allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia with Western long-range missiles. I believe yesterday the Russian President Vladimir Putin said that if the West allowed Ukraine and Ukraine used such weapons against Russia, it would mean a direct confrontation between the West and Russia. I think in the past also Putin said similar things about tanks, about other weaponry. But how seriously do you take these words?
Well, we have to always remember Russia is still a nuclear power, and it's a strong country. We cannot neglect this fact, and Russia will remain where it is. So we have to be very careful with Russia. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge Ukrainians have to defend themselves, and they cannot fight with one hand behind his back, their back. Having only one hand ready to fight. They have to fight with everything they have, with all the possibilities, with all the weapons we given to Ukrainians. Otherwise, it is not possible for them to really to win or even to get some important successes on the battlefield. So we have to make up our mind. Mm-hmm. From one side, we give weapons. From one side, we help Ukrainians. From the other side, we put limits, especially Americans carefully put red lines, which for Ukrainians doesn't make sense because they want just to be able to fully use the weapons they get. So I think it's a very delicate discussion, and many of these red lines were already crossed. And I think more and more understanding for the Ukrainian position is on the Western side. However, American administration, especially the president, don't want at all the escalation of this conflict out of Ukrainian soil. Especially, they don't want any harm for the NATO member states.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the West is taking these threats, the Kremlin's threats, seriously at this point?
It always was the case. It has always been the case because Russia, as I said, is an important country with a huge military power. And even if there is a 1% of chances that the Kremlin does something which is problematic for us, we have to take it into consideration, which does not mean that we should be afraid. We should try to let Ukrainians use full potential of the weapons we gave them. Otherwise, this giving weapons doesn't make sense at all. So I think we are trying to, and especially Americans, we are trying to find a way in the middle, maybe basing on cooperation with intelligence, American intelligence and the NATO intelligence to help Ukrainians to target Russian targets precisely, but hit Russia inside their country.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that this intensification of diplomatic efforts recently has something to do with the upcoming elections in the United States?
Yes and no. It has something to do, first of all, with the situation in the battlefield, because Ukrainian army is just going through quite successful offensive, and they got yes to be able to attack Russia finally at the Russian side. And they shown that this strategy makes sense. Russians living at the border, close to the Ukrainian border, Russian population is frightened, which is also a good thing because it makes a pressure on Kremlin. It shows that Russia is not invincible. It shows that Russia can be attacked. Also, the drones over Moscow, it's a very important element of, information war and mental war, putting a problem for the Russian population, because Russians can visibly see that they are also under attack. It's not only just war somewhere else outside their country. So I think this is the most important moment, and that's why the West, especially Americans, consider a larger agreement for the operations of Ukrainian army in Russia. Russia can be hit. Russia can be hit in the military bases. Russia can be hit in the key, places in their country without necessarily hitting civilians. So this is what is under the table, on the table. And of course, American elections make a momentum in a sense that Biden administration, until Biden is a president, wants to show that all this American engagement, which happened under his term, was useful and was really helpful and decisive for Ukraine, not only just to fight with Russia, but to win over this conflict.
We spoke about America, Ukraine's strongest partner, and I believe a partner without which Ukraine would not be able to fight in this war. But let's talk now about Russia's strongest ally, because this invasion also probably would not be possible if Russia was not, maybe not directly militarily supported by Beijing, but definitely the trade amount and the political agreements between Russia and China allow this war to go on. Just a few days ago here we had the Finnish president, Mr. Alexander Stubb, who said that China could pressure Russia into peace talks. So what role, if any, you think Russia could be playing in ending this conflict?
China, you mean?
Sorry, China. Yeah, that's it.
As of now, definitely we see that China plays a very dangerous game, in a sense that from one side, China announces or positions itself as a mediator, potential mediator in this conflict. The Chinese government prepared a so-called peace plan, which was not very well taken by the West and by Ukraine either. But that's how China tries to position itself for the global South countries as well, as a country interested in peace. And also China, for its own reasons, is against any violation of territorial integrity of any country, because that helps them to raise question of Taiwan under the One China policy. But this is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that for China, Russia is a key element as of now to make Americans weaker, to make the West weaker, because we are engaged in this conflict. And not only by weapons, but also by financial resources and diplomatic efforts. This is a war where the West took a very clear side. So for China, continuation of this war has positive effects in the sense that this makes us engaged somewhere else. We are not looking so much all the time at China, Taiwan, in the Pacific, but we have to concentrate on EU and NATO eastern border, the Americans included. And the other side is also that it makes the West engaged, maybe in this sense, we cannot be so concentrated on what is China doing in the Pacific, but it makes also Russia engaging the West. So instead of China engaging the West, Russia is doing this dirty job, which makes sense to China. But there's one more element to this. China knows that a long war is not good for globalization. So for China's long-term interest, if China wants really to keep the business going and to remain a country where the Western businesses continue doing business, this war is not in the interest of China. So it's a very ambiguous position to this problem. But yes, you are right. We know that without China's not open support, but let's say neutral position with a preference to Russia, Russia would not be able to continue fighting.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that if the Chinese President Xi Jinping picked up the phone and said to Vladimir Putin, you have to end this war right now because we cannot trade with it, our Belt and Road Initiative is getting destroyed by this, does China have such power to pressure Russia into immediately ending this conflict?
Not in the form of one phone call, but yes, China maybe it's the only country who has incredible dominance over Russia in a sense of economy, in a sense of purchasing oil and gas from China and from Russia, in a sense of diplomatic and political support China is giving to Russia. So, in a short word, without China, which is not criticizing totally Russia, Russia could not really operate in a world scale. So yes, if China says, we don't want this war to continue, Russia will have to take this into consideration very seriously.
Okay, thank you very much for the conversation. My and your guest was Małgorzata Bonikowska, the president of Center for International Relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Make sure to stay with us here on TVP World. There's more news and comments coming up.